The fight for life. The beginning. The fight for African Americans' lives started in 1619 when 20 Africans were deported to the English colony of Virginia. At that time, they were indentured servants, not slaves. They were bound to their masters for a certain number of years. Even so, there were attempts made to hold black servants for a longer time than the normal term of indenture, and this act sparked the start of slavery. Transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was an exchange of trade goods and slaves between the countries England, West Africa, South America, the West Indies, and the United States. These slaves were kidnapped from central and west portions of Africa. All millions of them were cramped up in small areas with unsanitary conditions and not enough nutrition. Along with that, they also endured the horrors of the Middle Passage. Here is an excerpt from The Interesting Narrative Life of Olada Ikviano. At last, when the ship we were in had got all her cargo, they made ready with many fearful noises, and we were all put under the deck, so we could not see how they managed the vessel. The stench of the hold, while we were on the coast, was so intolerably loathsome. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself. It almost suffocated us. This produced copious perspirations, so the air soon became unfit for respiration from a variety of loathsome smells, and brought on a sickness among the slaves, of which many died, thus falling victims to the improvident avarice, as I may call it, of the purchasers. Start of slavery. As these slaves came to America, they were disciplined and taught the ways of the whites. Once they were ready, they were sold to different plantations. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the slaves mainly worked on tobacco, indigo, and rice plantations. But as America grew, the slaves were sent to the South's huge sugarcane and cotton plantations. Masters were ruthless towards their slaves. They beat them, snatched them away from their families, and each had very little privacy. African Americans were treated as if they were inferior to whites. Their lives were directed by them, and they had no rights whatsoever. Abolition and the Underground Railroad. In the late 70s, people started to get restless. There were free blacks, but more than half of them were still slaves. That's what sparked the idea behind the Underground Railroad and other acts of abolition. The Underground Railroad was led by anti-slavery Northern people, mostly blacks. They helped slaves in the South escape through a series of safe houses. Another act of abolition was in 1831, when a newspaper called Liberation was founded by William Lloyd Garrison. The Civil Rights Movement. World War II had come to an end, but the African Americans were still fighting their war. They were trying to make changes in the way they were portrayed in the eyes of the whites. In 1954, for the first time ever, blacks and whites studied together. When the court issued this order, it caused mass riots, causing a few schools to shut down. Protests and boycotts led by famous leaders like Dr. King became more prominent and stronger as time moved on. One of Dr. King's most famous boycotts was the Montgomery Bus Boycott, inspired by Rosa Parks' quiet and defiant act of not giving up her seat on the bus for a white passenger. After millions of protests and boycotts, African Americans were finally treated the way that they deserved. 21st century. Even today, an African American cannot do anything without being judged because of the color of their skin. Even though they say discrimination has ended, a part of it has still survived. Some of the most famous examples are deaths of Trayvon Martin and George Floyd. Both were killed because people thought they were doing something illegal or they were acting suspiciously, just because they were black.
It is the story that no one can stop talking about, the shooting of Trayvon Martin. It seems like every day we learn about a new piece of the puzzle, and every day the outrage only seems to grow. But rather than allow the rhetoric to overshadow the facts of this case, we're going to step back and walk you through the night that Trayvon Martin was killed, minute by minute.
7:11 p.m., February 26th, a rainy night in Sanford, Florida. George Zimmerman calls 911 to report a suspicious person in his neighborhood. That call would last 4 minutes.
Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. The best address I can give you This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining, and he's just walking around looking about.
Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He looks black.
Did you see what he was wearing?
Yeah, a dark hoodie, like a gray hoodie, and either jeans or sweatpants and white tennis shoes. He's here now. He was just staring.
7:12. Phone records show Trayvon Martin is on the phone with his girlfriend. 7:13. Zimmerman is giving the dispatcher directions when he says the subject took off.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
7:15. Zimmerman hangs up with 911.
Okay, no problem. I'll let them know to call you when they're in the area.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
At the same time, at 7:15, Trayvon Martin's girlfriend tells ABC News she's still on the phone with him.
He said his men were watching him. So I said, what you following me from? And the man come and said, what you doing around here? Somebody push Trayvon because the head said this down.
7:16, the line goes dead. At about the same time, a neighbor's call to 911 reveals background screaming and then a gunshot.
Do you need police, fire, medical?
Maybe both. I'm not sure. There's just someone screaming outside.
Okay. And is it a male or female?
It sounds like a male.
And you don't know why?
I don't know why. I think they're yelling help, but I don't know. Just send someone quick. Say stop.
Okay. Does he look hurt to you?
I can't see him. I don't want to go out there. I don't know what's going on. So they're sending him.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right. What is your phone number?
There's gunshots.
You just heard gunshots?
Yes.
How many?
This one.
7:17, Officer Timothy Smith, the first to arrive, and according to the partial police report, the officer says, I was advised by the dispatch that the report of shots fired. And in the span of 2 minutes, Smith canvasses the scene, spots George Zimmerman wearing a red jacket and blue jeans, observes a black male wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt laying face down in the grass, questions the man in the red jacket who admits to shooting the subject and still being armed, secures a 9mm gun, and places the man in handcuffs. The officer observes the man in handcuffs bleeding from the nose and the back of his head, according to the police report. All of this in about 2 minutes, the police report says, a very tight time window, according to senior law enforcement instructor Alex Manning.
You really want to know what happened in those couple of minutes. Were they still running? Was he walking around looking for Trayvon, or was Trayvon heading out of there? So in those 2 minutes, you really don't know what exactly happened.
7:19, 2 minutes after Smith, a second officer arrives, Ricardo Ayala, who observes Zimmerman already in Officer Smith's custody. Sometime between 7:19 and 7:30, Ayala says he tries to get a response from the subject on the ground. A sergeant arrives, checks a pulse. There is none. And both officers begin CPR. Another sergeant arrives and takes over chest compressions from Officer Ayala. The fire department arrives, attempts to revive the subject. And at 7:30, a paramedic pronounces the subject, Trayvon Martin, dead. Then the police report says Zimmerman is placed in the back of Officer Smith's patrol car and given first aid. But exactly when that happened is a matter of dispute. Criminal defense attorney Holly Hughes.
And we don't even know what time the EMTs arrived. If it took them 5 additional minutes to arrive, you're now down to 5 minutes for them to perform a complete medical examination on him. If he's in that bad a shape, they're not going to do something that takes 5 minutes. They're going to bandage him if he's got a gushing gash in the back of his head.
The timestamp on this Sanford police surveillance video shows Zimmerman and officers arriving at the station at 7:52, 35 minutes after the first officer arrived at the crime scene. The police station is a 15-minute drive away.
Earlier, I was joined by Alex Manning, a senior law enforcement instructor, and I asked her, after she just saw what she just saw, what that timeline revealed to her. Here's what she had to say.
This reveals there was little, if any, medical attention given to George Zimmerman. If the paramedics were with Trayvon Martin until 7:30 when they pronounced him dead, according to my calculations, I have taken about 14 to 15 minutes the police, from them to get Zimmerman from the scene to the police station. I have them only attending to Mr. Zimmerman between 7:30 and 7:38, about 8 minutes, to do an assessment, to treat him for any wounds. He wasn't injured that bad.
Wow. And as a law enforcement person, you are taking a stand and saying that you can't believe it within that amount of time.
I can't believe it, unless I'm missing something. This is a partial report, but if I just look at what I have, 8 minutes is the most time they spent treating Mr. Zimmerman.